Hello, I'm Joel. I create games, and this is just a layout of what I want to create for a new game that I'm going to make. Um, Hopefully, this whole game, every time I work on it, I'll make a video basically saying, this is what I want to make today, and then I'll work on what I say I'm going to make, and hopefully that will help me focus on it. And then after I do that, I'll make another video saying this is what I made, and I'll add those together and then upload that. And I'll try and do that whenever I do it. But this is basically a layout of what I'm going to try and make. So, there's a game that I used to play on Congregate as a kid called My Pet Protector, and it was like a weirdly interesting game for me. Basically, what you did was you were a kid and you trained up to be a hero over the course of like your teenage years. And then at the end of the game, you became a hero and it told you how well you did afterwards, right? And it was a pretty broken game. It definitely had some problems, but I really enjoyed it. So I'm going to try and make a similar game to that. Also, I really like D&D and dice rolling and character creation, so I'm going to try and include that in my game. I really like dice rolling, and I want that to be like a physical roll in the game. So that would probably be one of the first things I work on, if not the first thing I work on. And also character creation, which I think is like a super important thing in a game to make your player care about what they're doing, right? And yeah, My Pet Protector in this game. This game's going to be mostly menu based. Basically clicking on different things that you want to do, and then you click them, and then the character will do them over time. So if you work a week, there's not like a mini game. It just says, you did the work week. This is how well you did. This is how much you got paid. If you do some training, it'll be like, this is the training. This is how well you did. And they might have like a random chance of going well or going badly. And then adventuring. So a lot of that will be going to dungeons that are on the map. And then you'll fight in those dungeons on like a grid system. And hopefully you'll also like hire members to come along with you as well. So this being like D&D inspired and by My Pet Protector inspired, it will be a medieval fantasy style game. It will probably have weird aspects on top of that. Maybe some whatever I feel like putting in basically, but that's the general theme, right? I'm going to use low poly 3D style, my one that I like to make in Blender, which is just super simple, no materials or anything, just 3D models with colors. And then I'm going to have it 2D with an orthographic camera, so it's going to be sort of 2.5D looking game. Because I'm not very good at 2D art, basically, and I think it looks really nice. And yeah, the game will last a number of weeks, so it'll last over multiple years, basically. And then at the end of it, your character becomes a hero, and they go off and do their own thing. And mostly the game's themed around how that character became a hero, not what they did as a hero, right? So I'm going to make the menu. I hate Unity Canvas. I really don't like it. So I'm going to make the menu basically in 3D space using 3D game objects. So I'm going to use Blender to make those game objects, and then I'm going to import those and basically make the UI so that it fits in with everything else that I make in Blender with that 3D style, and it does look quite nice. I've done it before. So there's going to be a world map, There's going to be character stats, a current town, and then the shop, tavern, board, and stables within those towns, right? So the world map will contain the current town, and the shop, tavern, job board, and stables that are in the current town. So those won't be accessible if you're outside of town. Generally, if you're outside of town, that means you're moving. I'll basically say you set a destination and then your character will go. You won't really move along the world map yourself, although there will be random encounters, I'd imagine, during that travel, which could just be events or they could be fights. And then the map will show the player traveling, and it will use a lot of time. So the idea is there's only a finite amount of time. And, well, in my Pet Protector, they use time in a weird way where basically over time you built up fatigue and you had to rest and work that off. But it wasn't very exciting. You had to basically sit there and do nothing for many, many weeks. It took up about half your time. Traveling will be different. It will use up a lot of your time, but there will be random stuff that could happen in between that as well. And the world map won't be randomly generated. It's just going to be a base map that's always there. Maybe it will be, but I don't want to. I don't want to, so that's will probably be one of the last things I do if I feel like it, making a generated world map. But I've got other things to worry about in this game, I'd imagine. So let's see what happens. Okay, combat. So the dungeon will be a 2D grid. That will basically be in 3D space, but the 2D grid will be effectively a 2D array. The player will click on the map that will basically get turned into rounded into an integer number in world space, and that will then move the character to that position. There will be like a square around the player that will indicate that your movement range and stuff like that. Hopefully in the dungeons there'll be some random generation. So either it's random how many enemies appear, or it's random the shape of the dungeon. I think I'll have like a snaking motion in the dungeon so that the paths get generated and then the walls get generated around those paths. I don't think I'll have like rooms or anything, but I'd like a fog of war system as well. So I'll see what happens there. The player will move in turns most of the time, or some of the time. Those turns will instantly repeat. That's okay because effectively there won't be any enemies around most of the time, but when there are enemies around, you'll also be able to use abilities for attacking and magic, and it's inspired by D&D and XCOM. In XCOM you've got movement points, and if you move one position, that's a whole movement sort of action, to move one space. In D&D you have a certain amount of movement that you can spend, move a certain distance. Here I think I'll use the movement from XCOM. You basically have movement points that you can use, but then I'll remove the but then I'll put that into the movement part of a turn and have actions that you can also use that are separate from movement as well. So that's like a mix of D&D and XCOM. But also I'll use sort of rolls, attacks, and they'll be randomly generated, so you'll get modifiers, and you'll definitely improve over time as you increase your abilities and things like that. However, the attacks can go badly, things can go wrong, randomly generated, so I quite like that sort of thing. And also, I want it to be roguelike. It probably changes a lot of the game, changes how it feels, but I'm a big fan of roguelike games, and if your character dies, it means that they die, and that's your story, basically. You went into a dungeon, you went too deep, you did too much, and then you failed, and you start again. So, the character. I think that's quite an important part of this game. It's basically all around your journey, right? And what you did. But effectively, you'll create the character at the start of the game. You'll include the race. Race being D&D race, right? Dwarves and gnomes, things like that. And that will affect your base stats. But then throughout the game, you'll develop the identity for your character, and that's basically the whole point of the game. So as you do things, as you train yourself, you'll gain skills in what you want, and you can basically make yourself as rounded as you like. You can create your own class. It's not really a class system. It's just you're gaining skills, and those skills will be based on your base stats, but ultimately it's what you make of it. So when you level up, you'll be able to level up, and then you can increase your base stats. There'll be a shop in towns. Different towns and cities will have different stuff, and you can get weapons and armor, increase your damage and defense. But also there'll be jobs and training, which you can use to gain money without having to fight, or you can increase other skills that are kind of fight based, but really just surround that. So bartering, that's about getting cheaper stuff, and then weapon proficiencies is about the weapons that you can use, not how good you are at those weapons, right? And so ultimately the lesson is, the point of this is, let's see what happens. I've made games that are more ambitious than this, I think, but this is a game that I want to make, and I don't know what's going to happen, so we'll see. That's about it. Thank you very much, and I hope you check out what I'm doing. All right, see ya.